Welcome to episode 82 of The Voices of Boyle. In this episode, Martha Higgins shares stories from her childhood living on a small family farm in Keash, County Sligo, that paints a vivid picture of life in the 60s and 70s in Ireland, where community, hard work and nature were at the heart of daily living. We'll hear about the vibrant days of Boyle as a bustling market town, nostalgic memories of haymaking and school life, and how those early experiences continue to shape Martha's work and worldview today. Martha also talks about her journey into writing, including the inspiration and dedication behind publishing her first novel, Hiding from the Heart. Plus, she also gives an intriguing preview of her next project, which is a historical novel based on the life of the legendary Jimmy Gralton. So grab a cup of tea, get comfortable, and join me for an interesting chat with Martha Higgins. Martha, you're very welcome to the Voices of Boyle. How are you?
I'm good, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Martha, you were born on a small farm, or you were raised, or should I say, on a small farm in Keash, County Sligo. So maybe can we start off, take us back to those days. What was life like back then for you?
Okay, I was actually born there too, Carlo,
right, okay.
Because we were all home births. So, in fact, I was born in the house that I was reared in as well. It was completely different. Even I was born in 1959, so I was a child in the 60s and a teenager in the 70s. There has been a huge difference, I think, and so many changes from then to now, far more so than at any other period. I don't think the period from when my parents were young and we were young was a huge difference. They might have thought differently, but I don't think there was a great deal of difference in how we lived our lives. But the change, probably all due to technology now, is really, really massive. So we had a small farm of, 4 cows, really, a mixed farm, no sheep. But it was dairy. Obviously, we had our own milk. We sent milk to the creamery. Everyone worked on the farm. The farm, you couldn't separate us from the farm because it was just part of who we were. Every day you got up in the morning, there was jobs to do on the farm, and that was our life on the farm. And we went to school and later on to work, but the farm was always a huge part of who we were. Yeah.
And daily life back then, as you said, revolved around the farm. That was the soul.
It did. And neighbours, you were very connected with neighbours as well because you always helped out one another. I always remember at haymaking time, if my father was finished, he went to help his neighbours. If they were finished before him, they came to help him finish up before the rain would come. You were always waiting for the rain to come when it was haymaking. It was the most tense time, honestly. I used to have I don't know, something in the pit of my stomach when it came to haymaking because you were always afraid of the rain.
You were under pressure.
And everyone was under pressure. And my father was terrible under pressure with the rain. And so were so many other men. It was like the weather was sent to torment them,
Yeah.
So I do remember that even though it was a beautiful time of year. I loved the month of June and July and haymaking. But it was also very tense because there was huge pressure to get the crops in for the winter because if you didn't get them then it meant you wouldn't be able to keep your animals. So It was, when I look on it as an adult, I can see why they felt such enormous pressure. But yeah, it was a lovely time in many ways in that there was more time. There always seemed to have, even though we were so busy on the farm, we always seemed to have a lot of time. I remember my neighbour Annie used to come, she'd walk over the road in the evening to bring home her cows for milking. And then she'd let the cows out on the road and they'd graze all along the road on the way home while she'd sit talking to us, So it never seemed like we always had that time. It's strange.
Yeah, and back in those days as well, life was simple, hard but simple.
Yes.
And that's and as you said, with the way things have evolved in the last couple of decades, your parents wouldn't have seen that shift as much as the current generations have. Like technology, as we were saying, is rapidly advancing so much.
Yeah. It brought complete change, absolutely. Yeah. That change wasn't there then. It was still a very simple life. I mean, we grew most of what we ate.
You ate from the garden kind of thing.
Totally, yeah. We had all our vegetables for the winter months. There was never a question of buying vegetables or potatoes, anything like that. We had all of that.
And did you then, kind of barter almost like with neighbours, or your neighbours might give you some produce and you would give them something, and
that was especially true of milk, because you would have cows calving at different times. So you could be short of milk. You might have a month where you actually had no milk. And so the neighbours supplied you with milk for that month and we would supply them in return. So that was particularly, I remember that about the milk.
And so interestingly enough, then when it comes to milk, back in those days, would you have drank the milk raw? Or
yes.
You would have been.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, we did all the time. Yeah.
There was no such thing as pasteurization.
No such thing as that. We drank the milk from the cow. Yeah. I didn't like it warm. I liked it cool. But some people did actually drink the warm milk from the cow.
Straight from the
But we did drink it straight from the cow. Yeah. Absolutely we did. Yeah.
And from your memory, what would have been the strongest, probably your strongest memory from life in rural Sligo back in those days, Martha?
It's probably all associated again with farming, because that was the thing. So I always remember days on the bog. Yeah, that were there wasn't the same pressure with the bog as the meadow. So I always remember that, especially on beautiful days. It was a lovely place to be with the bog cotton. It was hard work. It was dirty work. We had to scrub our feet and hands in the river before we go into the house when we came back. But there was something just so relaxing and nice about it. Yeah. I always remember those days.
And so then your connection to Boyle, obviously, is that you went to secondary school.
That's right.
So tell us a bit about those days. What was life like in Boyle during those days for you?
It was so different then. It was such a vibrant town. I always remember Boyle as being such a busy market town and so vibrant. I still remember Camden's horses on the street. They used to go up to the station to collect the goods, and that clop of the horses on the street. They were like big Clydesdale style horses, and the clippity clop up the street, Bridge Street, and up the Crescent, and as well as all the traffic, of course, there were lots of cars as well, but that was still a really big part of the delivery in the town, was the horses. There's so many more shops, of course. You had McDonald's on the corner was a really busy shop, paper shop. All school stuff for schools. You had the bazaar, which was a paper shop as well. When you think of it now, there's no paper shop. There's really hardly any paper shops left. So there was two really busy paper shops in the town. There was this shop called Cassidy's that's now gone. I think it was on Bridge Street as well, and it was a really an upmarket grocery shop. It was where you got things that you mightn't find anywhere else. So that was a really nice shop. Hearns in Patrick Street was really nice. My mother used to go in there. There was a snug, and you could go into a tea and biscuits in the snug. And Mrs. Ahern was a lovely woman. She was so nice. Sheeran's drapery shop, that's where we all bought all our clothes, really, and shoes in Patrick Street. John McLaughlin's shop at the top of Patrick Street as you go out to Mockmoyne was a very busy place. My mother used to go in there, and my mother was a real wizard with figures. Now, she didn't pass it on to me, but John McLaughlin, when she'd go in once a week, he'd get her to check all his figures for her. He'd have all his accounts made up, and then he'd say, "Mary, will you have a look at these?" And she'd tot them up and say, "Yeah." Okay. There's all those kind of memories, and of course going at Christmas time seemed magical. Taylor's window full of toys that we'd be glued to, and the simple string of lights across the street. Just a few bulbs, but it really seemed magical to us. The 8th of December,
yes.
Yeah, was the big day to go into town. Yeah, I just remember so many more shops then, and how busy it was, and lots of people. And when you went into town, you met loads of people. Like, my mother would go once a week to shop. She'd meet everybody, So it's really social occasion going shopping as well as just doing your shopping.
Of course. And as you said, back in those days, Boyle was a real trade town, a real busy town.
Totally. Then you had the fairs, of course, and my brother Michael remembers a lot about the fairs because he would have gone to them with my father. So, and the turkey market at Christmas as well.
Yes,
There was a
I've
big
heard
turkey
about
market.
that, yes.
And my mother always had turkeys. Nearly all houses had turkeys. So that was a big event because that would certainly paid bills as well.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, the income from the turkeys.
And, what was the atmosphere as a teenager then like in town when you were going to secondary school? Was it still a vibrant place full of
It's very much so. It was still a vibrant town. I always remember that as a teenager. We went through when I was going to the convent school. We went through phases where we weren't allowed into town and we were allowed into town at lunchtime. So sometimes during the phases when we were allowed, we would walk into town and it was always very busy. It was always, as a teenager, I suppose there was all that excitement of the boys' school and the girls' school and seeing the boys at lunchtime and that kind of thing as a teenager. But the town essentially was the same.
Yeah. And when it comes to particular teachers, friends, or local characters, any of them make a big impression on you? You were taught by the nuns, I presume.
I was taught by nuns,
yes.
Yeah. But the teacher who had the biggest impression on me was my English teacher, and that was John Casey.
Okay.
I think he may have become the principal in later years. I'm not sure about that. He's retired now, of course. But because I loved my English classes, and I thought he was really good, and he encouraged me a lot actually with essays and reading and so on. So I always think of him as one of the mentors I had. So and I'm really grateful for that. Yeah.
And did you like school? Secondary school?
I actually did. I really liked it. I loved the company. Because when you live on a farm, well, we weren't isolated, but I was the youngest of the family. So actually by the time I was going to secondary school, it was beginning to become more isolated because people were going away to work. So I was beginning to feel that it wasn't the same. So I loved school for that reason. There was always the chat and the Monday morning and catching up with everyone. And mostly I liked the teachers too. Some I didn't. The nuns, in my experience of the nuns was very positive. Yeah.
Good.
We had two principals in my time, both of whom were that I would consider very good women.
Yeah.
Devoted to education and helpful. So I didn't have any. Well, I know there was a lot of people would have had issues. I personally didn't. You know. Yeah.
And so, apart from school, then, Martha, would you have spent much time in Boyle, or was it kind of more focused out on the farm in Keash?
Oh, very much so. I wouldn't. You only went to Boyle to go to school or shopping. There wasn't any question of coming into Boyle to hang out or anything like that. That definitely wasn't done.
Yeah.
No. So I did come to dances in the hall.
Okay, sure. You remember those?
I do remember the dances in the hall in Boyle. They were actually very good. There was the show band, the big show band at the time was the Times show band and the Swarbrick Brothers. They actually represented Ireland in the Eurovision Song Contest at one point, and they were a great covers band. They covered all the songs from the Top of the Pops. We all looked at Top of the Pops, so they covered all that music. So I loved that. They were super. And then there came the psychedelic lighting.
Oh yes.
And that was a really big thing.
Yes, simple things like we take for granted now, but back then.
Yeah. And you had, of course, the crystal ball thing, that they hung from the ceiling and spun around. I don't think it's called a crystal ball, but you know what I mean. Yeah. But the psychedelic lighting, all the colour, the white was super white and all the colours became really, really crazy colours. So that seemed really exciting. But there was lots of really good dances in Boyle. Yeah, it was a good place.
And then over the years, Martha, what would you have seen that's been the biggest change in Boyle, visually or otherwise, that you can kind of put a finger on? That's
visually the amount of dereliction. It pains me absolutely pains me to see it, particularly when you see people who don't have enough housing. It really pains me to see that. The dereliction is terrible.
Yeah.
So visually, that is the big thing. That the town is no longer doesn't have that vibrancy. You know, Main Street was such a busy shopping street once. Now it is improving. I do see some improvements in it. Patrick Street seems very desolate now to me. The business now, I suppose, is up at the top of the town in the Crescent because that's where you have super value. But when I was young, Main Street was really
The hub,
the hub of the town. So the town centre has shifted, you know, but that's very common, I think, in lots of towns.
Yes.
But Boyle, and it's interesting how, you know, when I was young, Carrick wasn't vibrant. We considered Carrick a sleepy kind of a town. And now Carrick is just, I love going to Carrick.
Yeah, exactly. Carrick has kind of almost left Boyle in the wayside in that respect, from an economic point of view. And before we move on, the Royal, did you have any experiences with the old Royal Hotel?
Yeah, the Royal was always there. It was an institution. The Royal was always there. We went into it while we were waiting for the bus. We used to get the bus from the bridge to go home to Keash. So you could go into the Royal while you were waiting for the bus and keep an eye out the window for the bus. It was always lovely. I always really liked the Royal. It was so sad to see. It's great to see it now open as the gallery, but it was pity to lose the hotel too because it was a big, big part of the town. I did. I loved the Royal. I was at weddings in it and plenty of other functions as well, like, you know, birthday parties.
Funerals, everything was in.
Yeah, the
everything
room upstairs,
was. Yeah.
Everything was in the Royal, really.
It was the hub of the town.
It was completely the hub. It was and still is, I think, a huge loss to the town.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So let's move on then to your writing, which you've just published back in the summer. Your first book, I believe.
It is indeed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hiding from the Heart, which is a contemporary fiction novel, I believe.
Yes, it is.
Right. So for those that don't know anything about the book, maybe give us a quick synopsis of what it's about.
Okay, the book, interestingly enough, considering what we've been talking about, the book is set from 1975 to 1980. So that's the period. So it's quite nostalgic, I think, for a lot of people because that is the period of the book. And the reason I took that period because the protagonist, Colette, is a teenager then. And I know what it was like to be a teenager at that time. So I couldn't write it now because I don't know what that's like. So she's she's 17 when the book opens. She's coming of age. She dreams of the life she's going to have. She loves Mary Tyler Moore on the television, the American series where Mary is a reporter in a busy newsroom. And so she's all these great dreams about her life. It doesn't turn out like that. So it's really about how Colette copes with how her life turns out to be as opposed to what she had expected and hoped to be.
Okay.
Yeah, so it tests her.
Okay then, Martha. And when did you first get interested in writing? Was that recently or had you always a graw for it growing up?
I always wrote, mostly for myself. I don't remember a time when I didn't write pieces. A lot of the time it would be just something I wanted to write for myself. And even now, it's how I make sense of the world is by writing about it. Something that's bothering me, something I need to deal with, I have to write it down and then it begins to make sense to me. That's just the way I process things. I have written short stories and published short stories. And I wrote also for a community magazine for years, you know, bits of holiday, stories about holidays. It could be anything. And I wrote some stories as well, fiction for them. So the interest in writing was always there. And it was actually during COVID that I began seriously.
That was the impetus kind of to give you.
It was really for the book. You know, up to that I was only been just short stories. So I began a book in COVID times and I finished it but then abandoned it because it wasn't good enough.
Didn't feel right.
It didn't feel right. But it was a great learning experience. And
was it something similar to Hiding from the Heart or was it completely different?
It was completely different, actually, yeah. It was historical fiction. And then I was at a course with the University of Limerick down in Doolin, and I began that book. And how it began was I had a friend who was launching a book during COVID, a book of poetry during COVID, and it was online. And I said to her, and you look really lovely, you know, because she was the author, she had made the effort, even though it was online. The rest of us kind of showed up as we were, you know. And I said to her, you know, you look lovely. You're like the girl who's ready for the dance, and the rest of us are wearing the day. And she said, "Oh, there's a poem in that." And I'm not a poet, but I did write a poem about it. And that's where this came from, because Colette, at a point, she's getting ready to go to the dance. And that was really, I had this picture of this girl who's getting ready to go to the dance after being on the meadow all day. And really that inspired the book.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
And do you think you'd ever take the other book out and maybe polish it up and finish it, or?
No, but I will use bits of it.
Okay, but then at least you're getting some use out of it.
Exactly. I definitely will use bits of it, yeah.
But as you said, even if you didn't, it was a great learning curve for you.
It absolutely was. And since then I've talked to a lot of writers, and they said everybody has to do that first one, first book, before to learn how to do it.
Exactly,
you know?
yeah.
And I suppose that's something about writing. I used to think once that people were just born writers, you know, and I realise now you have to learn the craft the same
skill.
as everybody else. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a craft, and you have to learn how to do it.
And do you daily journal, or have you journaled? You know, some people call it morning paper, morning something, where they get up and they just kind of write whatever comes, like a brain fart, if you like.
Yeah.
Do you do that, or do you structure?
No,
okay.
I don't really do that. But when I'm not writing currently at the moment, because I have a lot going on and moving house and so on. But I would hope to get back to it in October. So when I am writing, I am disciplined about it, and that is the only way. I certainly found out that that's the only way to do it.
Yeah.
So that means writing 5 days a week at least, and
Brilliant.
every morning. The morning suits me. I'm retired now, so the morning suits me. So I would get up and begin straight away, you know. And I heard Kevin Barry speak about this too. He writes in the morning. He said he goes straight from bed to his computer with a weak cup of tea, and he writes maybe for an hour and a half then, before he has anything to eat. I'm tending to do that kind of thing too, and in a way, it's like what you said there about morning words or morning papers. It's like you're bringing something of the night into your writing, you know, maybe dreams or something from the subconscious with you through it.
Yeah, tend to be probably more creative as well in the morning.
I think so. And then in the evening, I might do a bit of editing. I might go over it and see, well, you know, that's going to work, that won't work. But I don't write in the evening. I'm not good in the evenings. I'm tired.
Okay. And so, Martha, for a book like Hiding from the Heart, for example, how many hours or how long does it take? I know you probably could never count, but like typically what would be the length of time it would take you from maybe when you say, okay, I'm starting now, blank page, let's start getting a structure to this book. What was the time frame for that?
Well, in total, it took me 3 years.
3.
Now, that was, it was finished probably a year before that. I began submitting then and getting it edited and so on. So, but definitely 2 years work in it, yeah. Because I would have rewritten it. Gosh, I rewrote it 12 times, I would say.
Oh, really? That much? Okay.
Yeah. I would hope that the next one won't need that much, you know.
Yes.
But I did, yeah. So many things I changed, and I wasn't happy with them. Rewrote it. Yeah. It's a constant process, and then there comes a point you have to let go of it and say, right, okay, stop now.
Would there almost a part of like perfectionism, would that come into it in any way, shape or form, that you felt like I want it perfect the way I want it, or is it good is better than, or done is better than like perfect kind of stuff?
There is a bit of perfectionism, like, you know, I suppose all writers wanted to be the best they can make it, you know, and I didn't want to let it go out there too soon if it wasn't ready, you know. I really wanted to be the best I could make it.
Okay. And so book launch and the book signings, when you were going through that process of finishing up the book, did you plan on doing a big launch for it, or how did that come about? Were you you wanted to obviously get some promotion going for it?
Yes.
It was in Boyle, Sligo, Galway, was it as well?
Sligo, Galway and Dublin. I
And
had
Dublin.
launches. Yes, I
That's
had.
great. So tell us a
Yeah.
bit about that process.
Yes. I think you have to do launches, really. There's no other way to get the publicity and get the book out there. So I talked to Lieber Bookshop in Sligo about it, and they were very supportive because this is independently published, so you don't have a publisher behind you or an agent. So that is the thing about being independently published. You really have to do the work yourself. So Lieber were very supportive. I had a great launch in Sligo and a great turnout, it was a real lift. It was fabulous.
That was back in July, wasn't it?
It was
yes.
3rd of July, I think it was, in Sligo. Yeah, it was lovely because I'm in a walking club, a mountaineering club, so they all came along. Any of the groups. I was in a women's shed. I'm in the women's shed in Ballysadare, so they all came along. I had great support, and it was a lovely evening.
Yeah.
So that was really good, and I sold a lot of books.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And where can people buy the book now? Where can they buy it online or physically?
It's available in Lieber in Sligo. It's available in the Una shop here in Boyle. It's in the gallery and the Old Royal Hotel here in Boyle also. It's in Mulvey's in Carrick, the Reading Room in Carrick, and many other shops around the country. And online buy the book is great. It's a website. It's a Sligo-based website, actually.
Oh, is it?
It is,
right.
But it's really good. It's the Amazon of Ireland, really, but you're supporting all the independent writers.
Exactly, which is very important.
So it's really, I have found them really great to deal with. They're really good.
Yeah.
So that's very good. And the book is on Amazon as well.
Great. Yeah. Maybe as a last resort.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I have relations in America and everything, so Amazon has been good for them.
Of course, in that instance, I mean, perfect.
Yeah.
And when it comes to your writing style and influences, Martha, who would you say would have been an influence on your style of writing? Do you think?
I think Maeve Binchy, really. Some people have said that to me, that they can see Maeve Binchy in it. So I think that, I would say that her style is an influence there.
And is she also a novelist?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
She's dead now, actually,
okay.
But she was a very prolific novelist in her time and very successful. I think when I was young, I read a lot of her books. So I would say she is. Other writers, I really like Donald Ryan. I love his style of writing. And I love the way he is attached to his characters, as you can see that as a writer, how involved he is with his characters. So I love that way of writing. I think Kevin Barry is fabulous. It's crazy. Some of his stuff is crazy, but it's so entertaining and so good. He's really, really good. So there's so many good writers out there. Yeah.
So then, I was going to say, but you had told me prior that you're currently working on your next book.
Yes.
Which is going to be a historical fiction.
That's right.
Based on a man that many people might know around these parts, but I know very well from researching in the past, Jimmy Gralton from Efferna in County Leitrim.
Yeah.
So for anyone that doesn't know Jimmy Gralton and his story, before we kind of get into it a little, maybe give us a little synopsis on his story and why it's so important in Irish history.
Okay. Like many people, I had never heard of Jimmy Gralton. And it's fairly extraordinary that John McGahern said he had never heard of him, and they would have lived very close by in Mohill, So it's extraordinary how he was obliterated from history. So Jimmy's Hall was the big thing for me, seeing that. And I'd also read a book called Deported, written by Des Guckian in Carrick.
Oh, an invisible alien or something like
yes,
that.
Yes, right.
That's right.
That's right. And and my son was very interested, and he gave me that book. So when I saw the film, then I just became fascinated with this story. How could all this have happened and be such a cover-up of it? So he was born in Efferna in 1886. And he had a very varied life, actually. He went to America when he was quite young. He became an American citizen. He was in the British Army for a period. He worked in Carrick in shops. He worked as a merchant seaman, actually, as well. So he came back to Ireland. He had been back in the early 20s as well, but he came back in 1932. The reason he went to America and stayed there was because he defected from the British Army. Is that the right word you use? And if defected, I'm not sure. When you leave the army, he went AWOL anyway.
There's probably a word on it. Yeah,
but he did. So, and the reason that happened was that he didn't agree with the British Army, what they were doing in India at the time, in Rawalpindi, where there was some famine, and that really touched him because of the Irish famine. So he wanted out of the army, so he left. And so he really couldn't come back in case he'd be arrested, because Ireland was still under British rule.
That's right.
So when 1932 happened then, and the new government took over, particularly being involved, well, there was a new government in 22, but De Valera's government, he felt that it was okay to come back. And but he quickly got on the wrong side of a lot of people, and which is interesting because you think being a new country and everything, they would have been accepting of him, but it feels like that they stepped into the shoes of the people who left in many ways in terms of how the country was run.
I think the church still had a very massive stronghold.
They did.
And De Valera's government didn't want to kind of stand up to the Catholic Church at that stage.
No.
So basically what happened with Jimmy Gralton was in 1933, he was, after going into hiding, he was home a year and he was basically told he was going to be arrested. He went into hiding. A few months later, he was captured and arrested in Boyle, I believe. Mm. And he was deported as the only Irishman in history that was deported by his own government.
Yes. That's absolutely
And that
true.
still stands to this day.
It does. And it's extraordinary.
It is.
And all the files are lost.
Coincidentally.
There's nothing, there had to be a heap of files on everything that happened with Jimmy Gralton, and particularly with his deportation. It can't be found. I mean, that's ridiculous,
Yeah, of course.
It's impossible to believe that wasn't orchestrated. And it is extraordinary to see an Irishman deported. How they got around that, of course, was that he was an American citizen.
Naturalised.
If he hadn't been an American citizen, I guess they couldn't possibly have, because that would have left him homeless, an alien. So because he was an American citizen, they basically said, off you go now, live in America, you're not wanted here. But it was a terribly cruel thing to do. And it was a very cruel thing to do to his mother, because it left her living alone in Effina. His older brother had already died from cancer, so there was just the two boys in the house. So it was just her and Jimmy living there. So when he had to go, that meant she was left on her own, and he could never come back to see her again. So it as well as everything else, it was a really cruel thing to do.
Yeah.
And it was such a slap in the face for him, who had all he ever wanted was to give local people and poor people a fair chance.
Yes, and he was
building the hall.
The Pierce Connolly Community Hall.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's right, the Pierce Connolly. He was a great admirer of Connolly in particularly, and very influenced by Connolly's writing.
Who was a socialist, I believe.
A socialist,
yes.
Yeah, exactly. Now, he did join the Communist Party in America. So, which was another reason, of course, that people didn't like that. They didn't like the fact that he was considered a communist. I would never have considered him a true communist. I think certainly a socialist. In relation to the hall, he set it up to provide education, music, entertainment, a place for people to meet, to get together. And it did all of those things, But they burned it to the ground because they considered that he was giving people ideas that they didn't want them to have. Both the church and the government did not want people to be strong and have ideas. They really didn't.
I think it was a lot of the local priests were given kind of inflammatory rhetoric based on what they believed was, they called it actually, they had a name on the community hall, a den of iniquity, I think is the word they use, something immoral, which I always find funny coming from the church in certain instances. Yeah. However, that led down to the burning of the hall. Yeah. And he tried, when he came back then after the first 10 years, the hall was still there. Yeah. But after a few months, with all this rhetoric that the local priests were saying, they burnt it down then.
Yes.
And that was kind of the that was the time for him to kind of up and leave. But
Yes.
as we said, they found him in Athlone and Mole.
Yes.
But what do you think? So Ken, well, I believe it was Ken
Ken Loach,
Loach
Yeah.
in 2014, the Jimmy's Hall, the movie.
Yeah, that's right.
Do you think that was an accurate? I've watched it and I loved it, and I think it was a great portrayal of Jimmy. What would you think in your words? Was that an accurate portrayal of his quest?
I would think so, very much. Yeah, I would say that was a very accurate portrayal of him. Anything I've read about him is that he was a very peaceful person. Yeah, and his way was always to negotiate, to come to an understanding, to agreements. He appears to have been very good with people, generally, that he got on very well with people. So yes, I do think that portrayal of him was accurate, but he was also determined, as you could see in the film in relation to the cattle moving, when they moved the cattle and everything. He was very determined on those things, to stand up for people and their rights. And the film, I think it was a great depiction of how Ireland looked at the time as well, the cottages and the way of life. There might be some notes in it that were a little bit jarring, like Ken Loach does use people who aren't actors, he tends to use some local people. It can work and sometimes it doesn't work, because you can't beat the craft, knowing the craft of acting the same as everything else. So I think sometimes it can lead to a little bit of weaknesses there. But overall, yes, I do think it was really good, and particularly for the reason that it brought somebody like Jimmy Gralton into the public consciousness, because it's shocking that he wouldn't be known about.
So then 2 years after the film was released, you then had the current president, Michael D. Higgins. He had some plaque, I believe, up in Effora erected on the site of the old hall, and he got a state apology, I believe.
That's right. Yeah.
And to kind of exonerate that, basically saying that he was under a lot of pressure. The government at the time was under a lot of pressure from the church. So, it's still hard to believe that something like that could happen.
It is a bit hard about, and that's a bit of a cop-out.
It is.
It really is a cop-out. You can blame the church, but really, they could have stood up for, they had to, what did they really stand for? They had to stand for something.
Yes.
And what they stood for was allowing that man to be deported. That's what it comes down to.
Yes, and I think a lot of it as well, and it's kind of strange how it's kind of coming to the forefront again in today's political landscape with the kind of censorship of freedom of speech, which is becoming very prevalent.
Yeah.
Not only in Ireland, of course, but around the world. We saw what happened with Charlie Kirk there a couple of weeks ago in the States.
That's right.
And I just think it's kind of crazy how history almost repeats itself.
Yes.
Where you cannot have thoughts or freedom of speech that goes against the state in certain ways, and this can cause a lot of division through societies and that. But ultimately, I think if there was more Jimmy Graltons around, the better. Regardless of what way you think, left, right, whatever. I just think we need to hold on to certain freedoms, because once we let them go, we don't tend to get them back.
I think that's absolutely right, Carlo. I agree with you there. And I don't. It's hard to know why people are so afraid of these voices, And also there's that being a bit out of touch with people, because Jimmy Gralton was on the run for months. So he was being hidden by neighbours, friends. Clearly they all supported him. So how come those people didn't matter either?
Exactly.
Yeah. So he had support. It wasn't that he was just a maverick that nobody looked up to. Lots of people saw him as a very valuable person and a good neighbour.
Of course.
And all of that. So, but yeah, they don't listen to people. And I find that a big feature of governments now is they do not listen.
They don't. And what I also think as well is, aren't we all adults that... Shouldn't we hear both sides of the story, regardless of how, for certain people, they would think this idea is a crazy thought?
Yes.
But you're an adult. I think you'd have the cognitive ability to decipher, is that correct or not, and make up your own decision. But by not hearing the other side, or not being allowed to hear the other side, that's where we go down a very mucky road, I believe.
Yeah. I think that's right.
Yeah. So when it comes to your book that you're currently working on, Martha, how are you going to portray Jimmy as a historical figure, or are you going to a local man, or how are you going to portray him in this historical fiction?
I want to look at his influences, like what was different about Jimmy Gralton, what made him what he was as opposed to somebody else, you know? And I think it's important to remember that he was born in 1886. This isn't long after the famine. That's still very raw, in that people don't talk about it. So he becomes very conscious at a young age of that kind of poverty, inequality and fear, that fear of hunger, because there was famines in Leitrim subsequently, maybe 10 years later. So that fear of hunger is there. I think that informs a lot of how he behaves in his later life, is that people are afraid of being hungry. So I want to look at his life in Ireland and his life in America, because he was very active in American politics.
Yes, that's correct.
And unions, with trade unions, all of what you'd expect. He was very active there. The downside is that there isn't very little. He left no memoirs. There's very little known about his day-to-day living, particularly in America. So I just have to do the best with what I have, and a lot of it will have to be made up.
Which is great, but you have a good base of historical stuff there, and you can put a few little bells and whistle on it to make it. Yeah, but no, that's
yes, that's it exactly. So I would just hope that I can capture who he was in the book, and also if I can make it into a good book, which I hope I can, I will be very, very happy about that, because it's something I really want to do.
Yeah, I think it's a great project. And do you think Jimmy himself would have seen himself, Martha, as more of a rebel or more of a man just trying to help his community out? Was he, or a mixture of both?
I definitely say a mixture.
Yeah,
I would say he really wanted to help, but he definitely he had a rebellious nature, without a doubt. He did not accept things without question.
Yeah,
it was he always questioned everything. So that would have made him a rebel.
Yeah,
undoubtedly
a big target for them. And I think was it 2019? There was a kind of a get together to celebrate. Was it? I think it was in Efrona. There was a kind of celebration with like they dressed up in the clothes from the 1920s, and did a big community event or something.
That's right. I'd love to have been at it, but I wasn't.
Yeah, that would have been amazing.
I was still living in Dublin.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great. And actually, they still do have, bonfire nights and that at Efrona Crossroads. You know?
Do they?
Yeah, they do. And people are invited to dress up and come along and come on their bicycles. And they did that this year, actually. Yeah, because that's a big feature with Jimmy coming home. When he does come home, in 1932, it's the bonfire night when he arrives. And he arrives at Drummond Station. And they hire a car, which was a horse and car, to bring him home to Efrona, and he passes by the bonfire at the crossroads. So it's a kind of a big thing, and it's a big feature.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And he was so happy to be home for the bonfire night. Yeah.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah, and I actually went during COVID to Efrona because I was reading about him a lot, and I said, what, let's go up there and take some photos. And it's just a tiny little, like, it's just a crossroad, really.
That's all. That's all.
Yeah.
And the house is just up. The old house is just up the road. I met a cousin of Jimmy's called Paul Gralton, who now owns the old house where Jimmy was born.
Right.
And it's still there. So he brought me to see it, and it was lovely just to walk around the farmyard and the building. The house is still there, the buildings, and it was just lovely to get the feel of the place. Yeah.
Because I think it was last year, actually about a year ago, I believe, a relative of his died. A Jim Gralton as well was his name.
That's
I think
right,
it was a cousin or something.
Yeah,
was it?
He was Paul Gralton's father, actually.
Oh, right,
yes,
okay.
That Paul that showed me around, that was his father.
Right.
That's right. That was in...
August last year, I believe.
What's the Manor? Did they live in Manor Hamilton? I'm not sure
now.
Paul lives in Ballyfarnon, but I think his father lived in Manorhammontel.
Right.
And he died actually. Yeah. Now they lived a lot of their life in England, but they had come back to live in Ireland, and that's correct. Yeah, he did. Yeah.
And a time, have you a rough timeline on when did you start kind of putting the outlines?
I started putting it together probably about a year ago now, that I began, gathering pieces and pushing stuff together, and I've been in touch with some people in America and so on. So I hope to get to work on it in October. I haven't been, it's been a very busy summer with various other things happening. And so I hope by October I'll get back into routine and get seriously working on it. And I hope I'll have a first draft, say, in 6 months.
Okay, that quick.
And then,
right, yeah.
And the great thing about having a first draft is it's not at all ready, but you have something to work with. And if you don't have something to work with, you can't do anything.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest things I learned about writing, Carlo, is that writers finish books. That's the only way you become one.
Yeah.
Because loads of people start books, and then 30,000 words in, maybe they get a bit bogged down and they don't know where to go with it, and they put it to one side.
Kind of like what kind of maybe happened in your first attempt, like this.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
You put it to one side because you're not sure where it's going and you're not really sure what to do with it. And that's the time you have to stick with it.
Yeah.
It really is. You have to stick with it, and if it's not working, jump on. Say, look, okay, I'll leave that bit now and I'll do a chapter further on.
Yes.
And from that, then that might give me a little bit of clue about where I am here with
yes,
it,
of course, yeah.
But you have to just keep at it. That is the only way to do it.
And would you have any bit of advice then, Martha, for anyone else maybe trying to do something similar that maybe has a bit of a passion and that's, there's an old book in me or something like that. What bit of advice would you give to someone
Absolutely
like that?
do it, yeah. But that it takes work and discipline. It takes discipline. It really does. It won't happen by, writing a page or two and then a week later another. It won't work. Because if you leave too much of a gap between your day's work, then you have to refresh yourself every time you come back to it. Whereas if you write one day, you get up the next day, you write again, you know where you are, you follow on from it. But if you leave gaps, it won't happen.
Yeah, you have to kind of, I suppose, make it a part of your day, a kind of a daily habit.
Totally. I know Stephen King would say that's the only way to do it, that when he has an idea for a book, he just keeps writing every day until it's done. He never leaves it, because he said if he leaves it, he loses the impetus. And suddenly it doesn't seem like such a good idea anymore, or something happens to it. And I think that's absolutely true.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
And outside of writing then, Martha, you're also a bit of a walker.
I am. Yes.
You're just back, I believe, from the Sierra Nevada in Spain. Tell us about that.
That was lovely. It was great walking. We were staying near Granada, actually, and it was my first time in Granada, which is a beautiful city, and the Alhambra. You have Granada's high anyway, and then above that you have the Alhambra looking down on the city. It really is very beautiful. But the Sierra Nevada, there was so much rain here while I was away, and the Sierra Nevada's burnt up. It's as dry as a bone. There's no rain. But we did some lovely walks in the mountains. They're quite high, yeah. So we would climb probably about 600 metres a day and walking maybe 14, 15 kilometres. So it was tough enough because it was hot.
Oh, I'd say so. And how long did you do in total?
We would be out from, say, 8:30 in the morning till 2:30, 3,
And did you do that for a week, 2 weeks?
We did that for 5 days.
Oh, okay, yeah. Right,
and we had a day off, then went into Granada. We did that. But it was lovely, and we stayed in a small town about 8 kilometres out of Granada. And it was a nice space. Yeah, you're right in the mountain. It's a hill town, so you're right in the mountains. It was beautiful. It was really interesting to see, and the walks were beautiful.
And have you done any walking in Ireland or elsewhere?
I do a lot of walking and I walk regularly. I live in Ballysadare, so I would do Knocknaway very, very often. It's my favourite place. I love Knocknaway. I do that very often. But I mean, Sligo Walking Club and Sligo Mountaineering Club. So we walk a lot around Sligo. We're blessed in Sligo with mountains. It's amazing.
Yeah, there's a lot of options.
Surrounded by mountains and options, and you don't have to travel far. I also did the Ireland Way at at one point. That means walking the whole length of the country. And we did a lot of it with a friend of mine. We did a lot of it during COVID. So we started in Castletownbere down in Cork. It took 12 days to get out of Cork. I thought we'd never get out of Cork. 12 days walking before you're out of Cork County. Such a big county.
I know, yes, yeah.
Over the Caha Mountains. So we walked all the way. I finished up in Omagh because I had got an ankle injury, but my friend continued up to Antrim. So we did the whole length of the country.
And how long did it take you?
Oh, we were a few years doing it because we were doing I was still working, so I could only do maybe 4 days at a time, you know.
Right, so you you did it in stages.
Yeah, so we did, and then COVID and it was really difficult during COVID. It would have been the ideal time to do it in many ways because, you know, you're outside and everything, but there was nothing open. And even when we could find accommodation, sometimes you can get into ease. It was really hard, you know, during COVID. But it was a great experience to walk the whole length of the country, you know, who you meet and what you see. And you feel you're getting to know your own country fairly intimately.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and you can see the changes as you go through the different counties.
And you know what's really great, Carlo? It makes you realise there are a lot of Irelands, you know?
Yeah.
It's not just the Ireland that you hear about in the media and everyone thinks this and everyone thinks that. They don't.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
You talk to people and what's going on in Dublin, nothing to do with them. It's like,
yeah.
It doesn't have any effect on what their life is like, you know,
course, yeah.
in the country or farming or rural people. So it's refreshing, really, to do the travel throughout the country and meet people.
Yeah.
And also land. What I found, one thing I did find interesting is the people with the best land are the least likely to want you on their land. You know, we had no problem, Sligo, Leitrim, Roscommon, no issues. But we did have issues in Tipperary and Limerick, where even though it's an agreed route for the Ireland Way, they just put up a sign, no walkers, you know? Yeah.
Strange.
Yeah, they just don't. They see their land. I presume they see their land is too valuable and they just don't want people on it. So that was a shame because it meant a few detours.
Of course, yeah, a few extra hours added on.
Yeah, it did. But that was only, we did not experience that anywhere in the rest of the country, you know, especially up Roscommon, some beautiful walking in Roscommon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you mentioned there, Martha, COVID. How did the whole COVID era affect you personally? Like, how did it with lockdowns and that? I'm always interested in hearing people's stories on because they're very, very important times for future to look back on these days. So how did COVID affect you personally?
I found it very difficult. I really did. I know I hear people saying, oh, it wasn't bad at all. I actually found it... First of all, I was very fearful, like a lot of people. I honestly thought so many more people were going to die. I had that fear. I thought, you know, I thought in the beginning we're all going to get it and it could be a matter of luck or whatever who survives this. You know, it really felt like that. It was just awful. Then I wasn't working, you know, because I was out on the pup scheme. It wasn't a job that I could do from home, so I couldn't work. And I found that very hard because I was at home, isolated. I didn't see my family, my grandkids during it. I always think of it as a horrible time. And there are a lot of things I didn't agree with and I don't agree with. And I certainly didn't agree with the schools closing. I think that has had a serious impact on children and particularly vulnerable children. There was nobody to look out for them. It was too hard on parents altogether. I mean, how did they think parents were going to work and the schools are closed and they can't get somebody to mind? And it was just an impossible way. What was expected of people was just really too hard. And then you had the whole issue where you couldn't see people before they died and everything, you know. And I think that should have been a choice, you know.
100%.
Yeah.
It was a very dark days. I hope
I
we
think
never
so.
go through something like that again.
I would absolutely hate to think we'd have to do something like that again.
The economy
Now-
wouldn't survive. Simple as that. Another.
No, that's right. Well, the damage to the
damage
economy
is-
was
yeah.
enormous. Yeah, and I think it still felt. I don't think we're fully over it, Carlo, either. It's still there, particularly in hospitality. It had a huge effect on hospitality, and I don't think it's ever really recovered from it. And all of a sudden, everything that worked stopped working. It's like, and costs went through the roof of everything, people building anything you wanted to get done suddenly seemed to cost so much more, and everything changed.
It did.
During COVID.
The amount of inflation from
Yes,
COVID alone, it was crazy.
it was crazy. But they spent money like it was water, It was like the one thing, and it frustrates me particularly now in relation to housing, I say if they were prepared to give some of the attention to the situation of housing that they gave to COVID, even a small bit of that, they would have it sorted.
Yeah.
But
That's common sense, you see. But
Yeah.
why can't these so-called geniuses
Yeah.
up in Dublin, why can't they figure that out?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I agree 100% with you as well,
and I
Martha.
think they handed over too much power as well, to NEFIT at that time,
Absolutely.
They thought, we can't do this, NEFIT said, That's not good enough. You're in government. It's your job is to govern.
Yeah. I think there was, as you said, there was too much emphasis placed on people in certain powerful positions. And they literally had the majority, I won't say all of it, but they had the majority of the country waiting every day at 6 o'clock for the 6:01 news. How many people got infected? How many people died? Where can we go? Where can't we go? Who can we see? Who can't we see? And then all of a sudden, we come to February 2022, when you weren't able to see many people in your household or that. And then we were told we have to start taking in refugees from a war, which is a separate subject,
Yeah.
but it still doesn't take away the fact
Yes.
that we were also told now we have to open up our country,
That's right.
and no one questions it.
That's right.
Majority-wise, I'm saying.
Yes.
And I found that extremely bizarre, as did a lot of people.
Yeah.
And as I said, it's a different topic, but there's people in certain positions had too much power,
Yes.
and were left kind of to pick up the pennies after it, unfortunately. But
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I hope it never happens again. Yeah, it was. And I don't think people would obey those rules again anyway.
No, they wouldn't. I think they've had enough.
None of us would do that again.
Yeah.
No, you really wouldn't,
Yeah.
I mean,
But as you said at the start, there wasn't too many people that weren't fearful of what was happening. And
That's
that was the early days.
that's right.
And
In the early days.
in the
for
very early
sure.
days.
Oh, yeah.
And I think the media had a big part to play in pushing that, because there was a lot of it, as you said, didn't make sense. Why were certain sections of society isolated and locked down, where we've never done that in the history of the world before, is lock down a healthy population.
That's right.
But this was a blanket effect,
Yes.
and that didn't make sense.
No.
But
No.
Yeah.
It didn't. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was an extraordinary time in many ways. Yeah.
But so moving on then, what's your plans for the future, Martha? Apart from writing this book, have you any other walks or anything like that planned?
I don't have walks, any specific walks at the moment, apart from continuing the walks around Sligo. But most likely I will do something else next year, which might be the Dolomites initially, perhaps.
Lovely.
Something like that. Yeah, with the club we will organise something like that for sure. And so writing, yes, that's the big thing, and family. Yeah.
Great. Very
Yeah.
important.
Yes, yeah.
Very important.
And of course, health is the big thing.
Well, look, if you
Everything
don't have that,
Yeah.
that's the main
That's
thing.
exactly it. So that's what I ask for every day.
Yes,
Yeah, is
exactly.
health.
That's
Yeah.
the most important thing. I always say that as well. If you don't have your health,
Yeah.
you don't have your happiness. And without those two things,
That's true.
and I put family into that as well. Like, so
Yeah, that's true.
it's an all-in-one.
Yeah, and I'm also, Carlo, I'm delighted to be back living in Sligo, because I I lived in Dublin, Galway, lots of, other places. I've moved a lot of times. But I really like being back in Sligo and near Boyle and family
near
and
your home.
Keash. And it's my
Yeah,
home. I just feel
exactly.
at home. So it's lovely.
Did you ever live abroad?
I lived in South Africa, actually.
Did you?
I did for 2 years at one point. Yeah,
Okay.
quite some time. It was actually when Nelson Mandela came into power.
What was that
it was just
like?
at that time. It was very strange, because I hadn't lived anywhere like that. I found it very, very strange. It was exciting in some ways, with a new government, but I also found the apartheid very shocking. And I mean, they certainly didn't go away overnight, and it probably still hasn't gone away. I don't know, but it was very shocking, that kind of poverty that was there in Soweto, particularly, people living in shacks, and the crime rate was dreadful too. It was a terrible crime rate in it, which was one of the things I really wouldn't have wanted to stay there for that reason, because being used to living in Ireland, you're used to freedom, and women wouldn't drive after dark there, so it meant that I found that a big problem with freedom to go places.
Curfews, almost.
A curfew, actually, almost like a curfew. And even during the day, your car had to be locked. You'd always have to be mindful of where you were going, plan your route before you leave. I found all that very hard,
A far cry from Ireland in those days.
Exactly, a huge cry from Ireland, where you sat in and took off from where you wanted to go, and you didn't think about those things, but you had to think about all those things. And I had children with me too, so I was worried for them. I definitely wasn't a safe place. I hope it's better now, but I'm not sure it is, but yeah.
And Martha, before we wrap it up, is there anything we haven't touched on that you'd like to talk about?
One thing I'd like to mention about the book, there's a lot about nature in the book. I'm hugely, I have a great love of nature. Maybe it comes from the farm and growing up there, but I place a huge amount of value on spending time in nature, hence the walking and the hill walking. And I think it's really important for a lot of people to spend a bit of time in nature situation. It has a very calming influence, I think, on people. Plus, everything is so beautiful. And sometimes we stop seeing that, stop seeing the beauty. You're busy and caught up in things. And
looking at the phones.
Yeah, exactly. And you stopped, you need to stop and look at a changing leaf. That's all, when now in autumn, especially, the leaves will be changing. Of
course, this time of year,
and it's
perfect.
so beautiful. And I'd love people just to lift their heads out of the phones and have a look, because it is beautiful.
Ground the feet and put it on the grass, the sand.
Yeah, all of that.
It is so important.
Yeah.
It all comes into the whole health thing as well, as we touched on.
Yeah, it does.
It really does.
Yeah. And it's just to really look and see.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Martha, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've really enjoyed our chat, and very interesting to hear about your upcoming book, which I'm going to read this one as well, but I'm really looking forward to the Jimmy Gralton one, because I think it's a fascinating, and it's a very important book for a very important part of history. But I'd like to thank you again for coming on, and I wish you all the best in the future.
Thank you, Carlo. It was a real pleasure, and thank you for having me on the podcast.